Inside a fire station in California, there's a light bulb that's been glowing since 1901, and nobody can explain why it won't die. It survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the birth of computers, and it's still burning today, because in the 1920s, powerful companies secretly agreed to make bulbs die faster on purpose. So could they build things that lasted? They could. They just chose not to. Inside a fire station in Livermore, California, there is a light bulb. It is small, dim, almost ordinary. It does not flash, does not spin. It does not look expensive. Most people would walk underneath it and barely notice. And yet, people have traveled from around the world just to see it. Thousands have watched it online. News crews have filmed it. Scientists have studied it. And for more than a century, that little bulb has refused to go dark. It has glowed through 2 world wars, through the Great Depression, through the rise of television, through the birth of computers, through the internet, through smartphones, and into the age of artificial intelligence. Presidents came and went, empires collapsed, entire industries disappeared, but one tiny light kept burning, not because anyone expected it to, not because it was protected in a museum, not because it was made of gold or guarded behind glass. It was just a bulb installed in a fire station, and somehow it outlived almost everything around it. But the longer it survived, the stranger its story became, because people began asking a simple question. If one light bulb could last more than 100 years, why do the ones in our homes fail so quickly? That question turned a quiet object hanging from a ceiling into something much bigger, a mystery, a symbol, and for some people, evidence of one of the most disturbing ideas in modern consumer history. What if some products are not built to last? What if they are built to fail? Long before electric light, darkness controlled human life. When the sun went down, the world changed. Homes relied on candles, oil lamps, open flames. They were expensive, dangerous. A single accident could burn down a house. A careless flame could destroy a business. Cities after sunset were dim, smoky, and filled with risk. For thousands of years, human beings fought the night with fire. Then, in the 19th century, inventors began chasing a dream, a light without flame, a light that could be controlled, a light that could fill homes, factories, and streets without smoke or open fire. Many inventors worked on the problem, but one name became the most famous: Thomas Edison. Edison did not invent electric light from nothing. He was part of a larger race involving scientists, engineers, and companies around the world. But his laboratory helped turn the light bulb into something practical, something that could be sold. The work was brutal. Filaments burned out. Glass failed. Designs collapsed. Experiments failed again and again. But eventually, electric lighting began changing civilization. Factories could run longer. Cities stayed awake later. Homes became safer. Businesses remained open after dark. The world did not simply become brighter. It became faster, more productive, more modern. And once electric light became a business, competition exploded. Companies rushed into the market. General Electric, Westinghouse, European manufacturers, small inventors, regional firms. Everyone wanted to sell the future, and customers wanted one thing above all else: bulb that lasted. Advertisements bragged about durability. Engineers competed to improve filaments. Manufacturers wanted to prove their bulbs could burn longer than the rest. For buyers, the logic was simple. The longer a bulb lasted, the better it was, because every dead bulb meant another purchase, yet another replacement. So in the early years of electric lighting, long life was a selling point, a feature, promise. But in a small fire station in California, something happened that no advertisement could have predicted. In 1901, a light bulb was installed inside a fire station in Livermore. There was no ceremony, no reporter, no crowd. Nobody looked up and said, history had just begun. The bulb was simply part of the building, a piece of equipment. It was most likely made by the Shelby Electric Company of Ohio, a hand-blown bulb with a carbon filament, built in an era when electric lighting was still young. At the time, Fire Station Number 6 did not look like a place that would become famous. Firefighters worked beneath the bulb. Horses stood in the station. Equipment moved in and out. Man came and went. And above them all, the bulb glowed. Quietly. It did what it was supposed to do. Nothing more. Then the years began passing. The station changed. The town changed. America changed. Horse-drawn wagons gave way to automobiles. The Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk. The Titanic sank. World War I reshaped the planet. In Livermore, the bulb kept glowing. Decades passed. Firefighters retired. New firefighters arrived. Radios entered homes. The Great Depression crushed families and businesses. World War II changed the world again. Still, the same light remained above the fire station, unbothered. At first, nobody treated it like a miracle. It was just an old bulb that still worked. But eventually, people began to realize something strange. Newer bulbs had been installed and replaced. Some lasted years. Some lasted months. Some burned out quickly. But the old Shelby bulb remained. Still there. Still working. Still watching everyone below it grow older. By the middle of the 20th century, the bulb had become impossible to ignore. Firefighters started talking about it. Local people became curious. Reporters began asking questions. How old was it? When had it first been turned on? How long had it actually been burning? The more people looked into it, the more unbelievable the answer became. The bulb had been glowing since 1901, not continuously, every single second without interruption. There had been moves, outages, and brief interruptions. But for most of its life, it had remained on, day after day, year after year, decade after decade. Eventually, Guinness World Records recognized it as the longest burning light bulb in the world. And suddenly, the little bulb in Livermore was no longer just equipment. It was a celebrity. People came to see it. Television crews filmed it. Visitors stood beneath it and looked upward like they were standing in front of a historic monument. Not because it was beautiful, not because it was powerful, but because it seemed to challenge the rules of ordinary life. Light bulbs burn out. That is what they do. You use them. They fail. You replace them. But this one did not, and the longer it survived, the more it felt like a message from another age. By the time the bulb reached its 100th year, the world around it had transformed beyond recognition. Humans had split the atom, walked on the moon, built computers, connected continents with the internet. Yet a bulb made near the beginning of the electric age was still glowing inside a fire station. Then came something its makers could never have imagined. A webcam. The bulb went online. Now, people did not have to travel to California to see it. They could watch it from anywhere. A century-old light bulb became a live internet event. And strangely, people became attached to it. When the camera froze, viewers worried. When the power failed, people asked if the bulb had finally died. When the live feed went dark, rumors spread. Was it over? Had the famous light finally gone out? Again and again the answer came back. The bulb was still alive, not bright, not strong, not lighting up the room the way it once did, but glowing just enough to prove it was still there. And that is when the story became something more than a curiosity, because people started comparing it to modern products. Modern bulbs did not last a century. Most products did not last anything close to that. Phones slowed down. Laptops became outdated. Appliances broke. Cars needed constant repairs. Televisions were replaced. Printers failed at the worst possible time. Everything seemed temporary. Everything seemed built for replacement. And hanging inside a fire station was a small, glowing contradiction. A product from 1901 that was still working. That contrast raised a question that made people uncomfortable. Did companies once know how to make things that lasted much longer? And if they did, why did they stop? To understand why that question became so powerful, you have to leave California and go back to the 1920s. By then, the light bulb industry was massive. Electric lighting had spread around the world. Manufacturers had factories, patents, territories, and global ambitions. But the business had a problem. If bulbs lasted too long, people bought fewer bulbs, and fewer replacements meant fewer sales. For companies built on selling millions of light bulbs, durability could become a threat. Then, in the 1920s, some of the world's most powerful light bulb manufacturers formed an international organization. It became known as the Phoebus Cartel. Its members included major companies and interests connected to the global lighting industry. Officially, the organization was presented as a way to standardize production, improve quality, and coordinate markets. But later research into company records revealed something far more controversial. The cartel worked to reduce the operating life of many incandescent bulbs. The target became roughly 1,000 hours. Not because longer-lasting bulbs were impossible, not because engineers had forgotten how to make durable products, but because the industry had begun treating long life as a business problem. If a bulb lasted too long, it did not create another sale. In some accounts, manufacturers whose bulbs exceeded the agreed limits could face penalties. What had once been an engineering achievement had become a commercial weakness. A bulb that lived too long was no longer a triumph. It was a violation. And for critics, this was the birth of one of the most important ideas in consumer history, planned obsolescence. The idea that products may be intentionally designed with a limited lifespan so customers have to replace them sooner. The Phoebus Cartel did not invent every form of planned obsolescence, and not every failed product is part of a conspiracy. But the light bulb industry gave the idea a powerful early example, because here was a product whose lifespan could be shaped by engineering decisions. A brighter bulb usually burned hotter. A hotter filament usually died faster. A longer-lasting bulb might be dimmer or less efficient in ways consumers did not like. There were real technical trade-offs, but there were also business incentives, and those incentives changed the way people saw the objects around them. The Livermore bulb became the perfect symbol. To many people, it looked like evidence from before the fall, a surviving witness from an era when things were made to endure, a small glowing object that seemed to whisper they could build things that lasted. They just chose not to. The accusation spread far beyond light bulbs. People began looking at their own lives differently. Why did appliances fail after a few years? Why did phones slow down after updates? Why did printers stop working when one tiny part malfunctioned? Why were devices harder to repair? Why did so much modern technology seem disposable? The bulb became more than a bulb. It became a question hanging from a ceiling, a question about capitalism and trust. But the truth of the Centennial Light is more complicated than the conspiracy version suggests. Engineers who studied the bulb did not find magic. They did not find lost alien technology. They did not find a secret formula that could make every modern bulb last forever. What they found was a strange combination of design, conditions, and luck. The bulb uses a carbon filament, not the tungsten filament common in many later incandescent bulbs. Carbon behaves differently. It can age in different ways. The bulb also does not shine with its original strength. It was once much brighter. Over time, its glow faded dramatically. Today, it produces only a tiny amount of light, barely more than a nightlight. That matters, because brightness has a cost. A filament that burns hotter usually produces more light, but heat damages the filament. The brighter the bulb, the more stress it endures, and the more stress it endures, the shorter its life becomes. So, in a sense, the Centennial Light survived by becoming less useful. It is famous because it still glows, but it does not light a room the way a modern consumer would expect. There was another advantage. The bulb was rarely switched off. For light bulbs, turning on can be brutal. When electricity first surges through a cold filament, the sudden stress can weaken it. Do that again and again, day after day, year after year, and the filament eventually breaks. But the Livermore bulb spent most of its life on, undisturbed, avoiding the repeated stress that kills many bulbs. So the mystery has two sides. Yes, the bulb proves that long-lasting technology is possible. But it also reminds us that every design involves compromise. Long life may mean lower brightness, lower performance, higher cost, different materials, different expectations. And that is what makes the story so interesting. It is not simply a story about evil corporations, and it is not simply a story about one miracle object. It is a story about the tension between what engineers can build, what companies want to sell, and what consumers are willing to accept. Most people want products that are cheap, powerful, stylish, efficient, and long-lasting. But getting all of those things at once is difficult, sometimes impossible. So companies make choices, engineers make choices, consumers make choices, and over time, those choices shape the world we live in. The Centennial Light survived because of a rare combination of old design, gentle operation, low output, and luck. But the reason people care about it is not just technical. People care because it feels like a challenge. It challenges the idea that everything must be replaced. It challenges the culture of upgrades. It challenges the feeling that the things we buy are secretly counting down to failure. And maybe that is why the bulb became famous. Not because it is useful, not because it is bright, but because it refuses to disappear. There is something deeply human about that. We live in a world where almost everything feels temporary. Phones become outdated in a few years. Apps change overnight. Ours fill with software. Memories move into clouds. Entire industries can rise and collapse in a decade. People are told to upgrade, replace, refresh, and move on. But inside that fire station, one object has done the same simple job since 1901. It has not become smarter. It has not been redesigned. It has not needed a subscription. It has not asked for an update. It has simply glowed, quietly, patiently, long after the people who installed it were gone. The men who first saw that bulb are no longer here. The firefighters who worked beneath it in its early years are gone. The horses are gone. The old equipment is gone. The world they knew is gone. But the bulb remains, a tiny bridge between the past and the present. And one day, it will fail. Maybe because the filament finally breaks. Maybe because of a power issue. Maybe because age eventually wins, as it always does. When that day comes, the story will spread around the world. People will say, the famous bulb finally went dark. And for a moment, millions of people who never saw it in person may feel strangely sad. Because somewhere along the way, that tiny light became more than glass, metal, and carbon. It became proof that ordinary things can carry extraordinary meaning. It became a reminder that history does not always sit behind museum walls. Sometimes it hangs above a room, still working, still glowing, still waiting for someone to look up. And that is the strange power of the Centennial Light. It began as a tool. It became a record. Then a mystery. Then a symbol of endurance, a symbol of suspicion, a symbol of a world that once built things differently, and a world that now throws things away faster than ever. Maybe the bulb does not prove every conspiracy people attach to it. Maybe it does not mean every modern product is designed to fail. But it does prove something quieter, something harder to ignore. The objects around us are not neutral. They are shaped by choices, by business models, by engineering limits, profit, by convenience, by what companies decide to make and what consumers decide to accept. And sometimes, one object survives long enough to make us question all of it. Tonight, inside a fire station in Livermore, California, A small light continues to glow, dimmer than it once was, older than almost anyone alive, still hanging in the place where generations have looked up and wondered how it lasted so long. It has watched the world move from horses to cars, from radio to television, from computers to smartphones, from the first electric age to the age of artificial intelligence. And through all of it, it has done one thing. It has stayed on. Not loudly, not perfectly, not forever, but long enough to become almost impossible. Because sometimes the most extraordinary stories are not about wars, or kings, or machines that change the world overnight. Sometimes they are about something ordinary. It is a small bulb, a fading glow, a quiet fire behind glass, still burning after more than a century, and still asking the same question: why did everything else have to die so soon?